Welcome back, Pokemon trainers, to the Utrecht 2023 special event. And very unfortunate to see that in Swiss Round 7, that disconnect there. A reminder that fundamentally we are still at the mercy of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just one of the other sides that we unfortunately sometimes have to see in these tournaments. But yeah, plus side, Baxcalibur won. Baxcalibur is now advanced to 6-1. I did say. I was waiting for the Baxcalibur to appear on stream, so that's some kind of solace that we do take, of course. But yeah, still, it was a very, very good game until that point. So I'm still glad we were able to feature it.
Yeah. I have to say, even though we have this Mousehold Baxcalibur rivalry going on, I'm still a massive fan of Baxcalibur. Dragon Ice is a really cool combo, but you don't want to be the trainer in the position to sort of win by default on either side, really. Obviously, it's nice if you're the one who's declared the winner in the end for obvious reasons, but at the same time, it's a hollow victory in a way. It's not a true game of Pokemon played out to the full. I'm sure that, for Xavier there, this late in the day, maybe with the tiredness setting in, it's perhaps a welcome relief. But, it's obviously not why we play the game, and unfortunate to see.
Yeah, we've still got 2 more games left, so you can still absolutely make it. Both of those trainers were very much still possible to get into that day 2. You do need the 2 wins if you drop the X2, and just 1 more if you are still at the 6-1. And this is at the point where we are starting to see who is going to be making it into day 2. We already know a few people. Some of the 7-0s will have already guaranteed their spot into that day 2. I know that Alex Gomez and Eric Rios, the 2 Spaniards, are both 7-0 as well, so they have made it guaranteed into that day 2. And yeah, there's going to be a couple of other trainers as well that will have made it, and we've got the 6-1 still. So there's going to be some trainers that were 6-0. Oh, they dropped 1. Now you can only drop 1 more. You're getting to the, it's a little bit more uncomfortable, but still only 1 game away. And then you've still got the 5-2s that are still playing out for that into the day 2. Without the opportunity to lose any more games.
Yeah, absolutely. It's those trainers who have to keep their mettle, keep their resolve going into these final 2 games. Hats off to their resilience. And as for the trainers who have guaranteed their slot in day 2, on the one hand, you can sort of take your foot off the pedal. On the other, obviously, the better you do today, the more buffer room you have tomorrow. So, it's nice to have that comfort blanket. And I guess for some trainers, their goal going into this special event will have been just to make day 2. But still, in order to get the best possible results, of course, the ideal situation is that you keep winning.
Yeah, absolutely. A 12-2 will guarantee a top cut. So obviously, a 14-0 would be brilliant. We're yet to see that. Looking forward to the day we do see that. We got 13-1 back in the Bochum Regional Championships. We did get that with Giuseppe and Museko. Was able to get that feat. Not quite that 14-0, but we'll get that at some point. But yeah, 12-2 does guarantee it, and 11-3 is very likely. However, not guaranteed. So you do want to be getting as many wins as possible in these earlier stages. If you go 9-0, then you've got such a buffer because your resistance is going to be helped out in that day 2 because you're facing stronger opponents. So then you likely only need those 2 wins. But if you've gone in as the 7-2, you likely need to get to that 12-2, and that means an undefeated run.
Yeah, absolutely. You're a hard taskmaster, Jamie, asking a lot of these trainers. He just wants to see a 14-0. How hard can it be? Absolutely, though. It's a fascinating concept, the resistance of your opponents. And, one that can have such an impact, because how else would you be able to differentiate all of the trainers in the 11 and 3 brackets, say?
Yeah, absolutely. The undefeated runs are always the great ones to see. We saw recently at the World Championships, Eduardo Cunha on day 2, straight into that day 2, undefeated run at the World Championships, fantastic. I do recommend going undefeated in a regional. I did do that back in 2018. Very nice. But we didn't have day 2 Swiss back then. I just went straight into the top cut. But yeah, it's always a nice thing. And I'm waiting to see when we do get to that 14-0.
Yeah, absolutely. A cheeky self-plug there from Mr. Boyd himself.
I'm all washed up at this point. I've got to feel good about myself sometimes.
I'm not sure about all washed up. They're certainly casting in itself. That's an achievement, and a wonderful caster at that, Mr. Boyd. And it's a pleasure to cast alongside you today as we're nearly able to get into our Swiss Round 8 match.
Yeah, we were talking about the standings previously, so I think we can have a quick look at those as well. So yeah, we do have confirmation there. Eric Rios and Alex Gomez, as previously mentioned, had made it into that 7-0. Along with 3 other trainers there, we got Thomas Grabui as well, Federico Camporisi, and Juan Odrezola that we did feature as well. All have guaranteed their way into that day 2.
As has Niels Dunlop, another trainer that we featured today, and we can see Jack Clark there, who has gone 6-1. A trainer who I believe had a really good performance at Liverpool, just shy of top cut, I believe. But he's very much still in contention now.
Yeah, I've heard he's still running the same team that Gavin Michaels was running back in the Bochum Regional Championships. He did adapt to that and is apparently still running it today and still being successful with that 6-1. We've got another UK guy there with the Sam Bentham coming out with the 6-1. Very good showing for them as well. I know that they're rocking a very similar team that they've done previously. They are a big advocate of Tyranitar, so they seem to be doing pretty well with that. But yeah, some really, really good players there at the 6-1 and still just one win away from getting into that day 2.
Yeah, and it just, again, it goes to show the advantage you have if you are... if you've played Pokemon a lot, quite simply. Eric Rios, Thomas Gravois, these are names that we keep seeing doing well at these championships. So, you know, practice really does make perfect as we get into the 17 to 32 rankings now. We can see Marco Silva there, Oliver Eskelin, Maurice Uteg, who of course won the Bilbao special event last year, I believe, in the Sword and Shield season, and Davide Carrere, another player that we featured on stream today.
Yeah, so still plenty of players that can make their way into the day 2 with this final round. So you can see there the top 32 is still just 6-1. So all those players are just one win away from being able to secure their way into that day 2, which is obviously what they are looking to do.
And we can now confirm that the match that we're going to be seeing, it's one of the names there, number 23, it's Roberto Parente against Jost Malczewski.
Yeah, Roberto Parente had a really, really good showing at the World Championships recently. I believe they went into the top 16, at least into the top cut. I can't remember if it was top 16 or the top 32, but a really, really good showing. So I remember seeing them on stream with their hyper offense team that they did have back then, and had a really, really good showing.
Absolutely fantastic, and it's a really exciting match to be able to bring to you in just a few moments' time as we get the players seated and ready to battle. Test of resolve at this point in the day. The teams we'll be seeing, I can't wait to see which Pokemon these trainers have picked, whether it will be another hyper-offensive showing from Roberto Parente or not.
Yeah, that was what he was successful for previously. So there have been hyper-offensive teams that have been successful going into this format. We've seen that. I think that the hyper-offense is probably tacked onto Prankster Tailwinds teams that like to just set Tailwinds, do a lot of damage. That seems to be how people are referring to that archetype as. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see, if we're thinking of a hyper offense team, a Talonflame or a Murkrow. Those are generally the two options you have for the Prankster Tailwind. Obviously, there's other Pokemon that can set the Tailwinds. You can have a Booster Energy Speed Iron Jugulus, and that would still very fast set the Tailwind. Yeah. But just not quite as fast as the Prankster. So you don't necessarily need that for what would be considered hyper offense, but it does seem to appear on it quite often.
Yeah, hyper offense is, I would say, adjectives applied more to Talonflame than a Murkrow, and Murkrow is something you saw a lot in Regulation A, holding an Eviolite often to boost its defensive stats, but you tend to get more mileage out of a Talonflame, given it is just a stronger Pokemon overall, no offense to Murkrow. And of course, though, once it takes any damage, its Gale Wings ability is deactivated, and so its Tailwinds and any other flying type move are no longer prankstered, so to speak.
You say that Talonflame is stronger. I believe that Murkrow is actually very slightly stronger than a Talonflame.
Is it?
You just don't tend to run it in attack because you tend to go for foul plays instead.
Okay,
because then you can invest everything of your training into the bulk rather than having to use up some offensive investment as well, so that so then you just rely on foul play instead. But yeah, Murkrow is actually slightly stronger than Talonflame.
Wow, well, that is news to me, I have to admit. And as you say, though, there, Jamie, it's a question of how you want to train these Pokemon, and that is often how Talonflame ends up being stronger, even if on a base level it might not be initially.
Yeah, and it's about the training, right? So Talonflames need their speed as well, because obviously you have a Prankster Tailwind, a Gale Wings Tailwind that's going to be priority, but that can be broken and not guaranteed after you've broken the Gale Wings and taken some damage on your HP. So then you want that extra speed so that even when that's broken, you are still as fast as possible. And very often you run Will-O-Wisp on Talonflame, so then you're going to be able to want to burn the physical attackers before they attack, whether you've Tailwinded or not. Murkrow doesn't really have that problem, because it's just there to set Tailwinds, and then be a bit bulky, and sometimes Hazes on Dozo, and then chip away with foul play. So they do run quite significantly differently. You can still run a Brave Bird on Murkrow, even if you're opting for foul play generally. But yeah, the fact that you get damage reduction in the Will-O-Wisp, as opposed to I'm here for Dondozo mainly, does counter each other quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the move Haze is something that's really picked up in usage well, in the presence of Dondozo mainly, and it's not a move that we've seen so often previously, and that is something that Murkrow is able to go for.
Yeah, and it was the go-to at the very start. Everyone was saying, oh, we need to counter Dondozo, or we get rid of the boosts. Must be Haze. Must be Clear Smog on Amoonguss as well. That's significantly dropped off.
Yeah,
also,
really.
like Haze is like, it's Palafin at this point. That's the Haze Pokemon, and Murkrow will sometimes be it. But yeah, Clear Smog seems to have really dropped off Amoonguss. I think mainly because players at this very start, especially in Regulation A, they were like, okay, we need a Dondozo counter. The go-to, obvious one is Clear Smog on this Amoonguss.
Yeah.
But then trainers are finding different ways of beating Dondozo without necessarily having to get rid of the boost.
Yep.
Maybe they can just make their Pokemon bulky enough to just weather the onslaught of the +2 attacks.
Yep.
And then if you survive, you can respond with the attacks. And then those chipping away with the attacks would be enough. So Clear Smog seems to have disappeared on Amoonguss, and it is quite an interesting meta adaptation that we've seen, because it was on it all the time at the very start, and it seems to have dropped off a lot.
Yeah, and these days, the set that we tend to see on Amoonguss is just more useful generally. Clear Smog perhaps not providing as much as we do have our players seated here. And we'll have to see if it's another Dondozo Tatsugiri, and as you were saying, Jamie, it's the chipping away at the Dondozo strategy that most players have been opting for today, at least that we've seen on stream.
Yeah, it does seem like it, but something we have been mentioning on stream before as well is that Lilligant Torkoal that was so successful for Abdullah back in the Vancouver Regional Championships, and it seems that Jost is going to be running that as well. So yeah, we can see the accolades of these players here. So it was World's Top 16, so I was correct initially with my with remembering where Roberto came in. That's a very, very strong showing from them back in that tournament, as well as getting some really good placements in previous regionals, getting to the top 16 in the Bochum regionals back in 2020, and top 16 in Cologne as well. And it seems like Jost here is still making a name for themselves in this tournament here.
Still making a name for themselves, but for my money, he's already done that, reaching this point of the competition. I love Jamie, how you see these achievement presentations as a sort of test. What do I remember from my Pokemon VGC history? And it's really impressive to see how much you know, and I can't wait to see how Jost deals. How Jost copes in this situation. He seems fairly relaxed going into this game, and that's always something that's worth seeing. Confidence is so key in this game, and now we can see Roberto's team, and I mean, my eye is immediately drawn. I think we were talking about it earlier, Jamie. It's not Roaring Moon, it's Salamence.
Yeah, we were mentioning Intimidate is still good, but that's Arcanine. What other Intimidate Pokemon are in the format? Oh, Salamence, yeah. Yeah, we've forgotten about that. No, we have not. Roberto has not forgotten about Salamence in the slightest. And actually running a special variant of the Salamence. It's got a much higher physical attack than its special attack. It's still got a respectable special attack, for sure. But when you're opting for the physical, you kind of need to be relying on dual Wing Beat. And that's not the most reliable of moves. It's got the shaky accuracy. Obviously, Air Slash has the shaky accuracy, not as bad. It's a little bit more accurate. And Draco Meteor is going for that 90% accuracy as well, so going to be a little bit shaky, but still going to be much stronger. The option for a Dragon-type move for Salamence would have been Dragon Claw, which is weaker than Draco Meteor, or Outrage, which is probably stronger based on the physical attack, but very unreliable.
Very unreliable indeed. And what I like about this special Salamence is that we have a 3-in-3 balance of special attackers and physical attackers for Roberto, which gives him some more leeway. He doesn't index too heavily on one stat or the other. And now as we get into Jost's team, we have a similar nice balance of physical and special attackers.
Yeah, it seems a very similar team here. We were mentioning, Abdullah won with Elegant Torkoal, won with these 6 Pokemon. This was the team that was brought and able to win that previous championship. So it seems like Jost was relying on that as the strategy going forward here. Being successful so far, 6 wins is very, very good so far. Just one win away from that day 2 with a team that has already proven itself.
Absolutely. Will Lilycole be able to do it again? Is this the exact team that Abdullah won? I mean, in terms of Pokemon, yes, but of course we won't be able to know how Jost has trained his Pokemon. There might be a few differences made, and of course that is one of the brilliant things you can do with Pokemon teams. You can take a team that exists, make slight adjustments, and then completely catch your opponents off guard. In an open team sheet format, of course, you can see a lot of information, but you can't see how they're trained.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I can spot is potentially different is the Terra Blast on the Fluttermane. I don't think that was the tech move of choice as such on these specs. You usually see Moonblast, Dazzling Gleam, Shadow Ball. Those are the 3 standard moves to have on specs, and then it's a filler. It's Power Gem sometimes, it's Thunderbolt sometimes, it's Energy Ball sometimes, which I'm quite surprised not to see on this Fluttermane, given that you have to commit to the Terra Blast, commit to the Terra to get to that Terra Blast, and Energy Ball actually ends up being stronger than Terra Blast overall, even when you've got that Terror.
It's a really good point. I wonder what situations that's come into play for Jost. It'll be really interesting to hear from him why he hasn't gone for the energy ball there. Now, presumably, given that Jost's team is essentially the one that won Vancouver, it may well be one that Roberto has practiced a lot against, predicting that he'd be going up a few Lilikol today.
Yeah, that's one of the risks of running a team that has previously been successful. It's proven to be successful, therefore it will be able to win games. But then other trainers will have seen, this is a team I must be ready for. So then it comes down to the strength of the team itself versus what trainers have built to be able to counter that. Is Salamence the counter to this team? It seems like it will match up very well against Lilikol. If you're taking on the Lilikol itself, you'll survive after your eruption for sure. So then you'll be able to respond back with an S-Slash that'll bring the Lilligant down to its sash. Your Flamethrower will bring it down to its sash as well. Draco would probably knock out the Torkoal in one shot because it's going to be not so great on its special defense. So yeah, Salamence, quite a good adaptation here.
Yeah, it really is. I would love to see Salamence, which is, of course, our primary plushie buddy here on the desk, coming all the way through. And it's just really cool to see a Pokemon that we haven't seen yet on stream, and indeed a Pokemon we haven't seen very much at all in Regulation B coming to the fore.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a team that we would expect. We would have expected some players to pick up this Lilikol team, but it is really nice to be able to see these other Pokemon coming to the fore.
Absolutely, and getting into turn 1 of this Swiss, round 8 here, we can see our leads. It's Talonflame and Fluttermane for Roberto. A lovely rhyme there as well, and Great Tusk and the Dragonite for Jost.
Yeah, so going to be able to set that Tailwind very, very quickly, but you don't particularly need to on this turn. You're going to be outspeeding both the Dragonite and the Great Tusk on the opposing side. In fact, actually, no, I take that back because this is a Choice Scarf on the Great Tusk. Normally, you would not need the Tailwinds, but in this case, you probably do, so that you are guaranteeing that your Fluttermane is able to outspeed, because you won't be able to Will-O-Wisp before it attacks because of that Choice Scarf. Therefore, you probably need that, but you can't go for Priority Gale Wings if it is broken by Extreme Speed.
Which indeed it is, and we see a Rock Slide coming out, and Talonflame avoids the Rock Slide. That surely would have been enough to pick up the knockout there, it being doubly super effective against Fire and Flying, as Talonflame is able to get up that Tailwind. Absolutely crucial as Fluttermane goes for a Dazzling Gleam, super effective against both Pokemon, and indeed Great Tusk goes all the way down.
Yeah, that was a fantastic play from Jost that just didn't quite pan out. That Rock Slide, if it had connected, that means that Talonflame is KO. There is no way that it is surviving that attack, and then that's no Tailwinds. That means that the Great Tusk has the potential to just go on the offense once again. Well, you'd be KO'd to the Dazzling Gleam at least, but then you'd be able to outspeed with whatever's in the back. Maybe the Lilligant's in the back because the Torkoal has just joined the field, so you'd be able to outspeed in that regard. But Torkoal doesn't matter too much with the fact that Tailwind's still up, because you're going to be slower anyway. Dragonite likes to go for extreme speed. Maybe it will be able to pick up the knockout on the Talonflame. It'll be pretty close if it does. It's taken just under half, so it probably won't be able to pick up the KO with the extreme speed here. But then if it does go for the Terra Blast into the Fluttermane, then you'll be able to at least get rid of your Dragon typing so that Dazzling Gleam won't be doing as much. And then the Torkoal, it's not threatened too much here either, because that Fluttermane going for Dazzling Gleams isn't going to be doing too much damage to the Fire-type Torkoal, and it's really defensive as well, so Brave Birds won't do too much.
Brave Birds won't do too much, as Roberto is running low on time now, locking in his moves, and Extreme Speed does come out again from the Dragonite into Talonflame, bringing it down to very low health. Brave Bird coming out into the Torkoal, very good Pokemon in its physical defense, so it's able to take that fairly well. As another Dazzling Gleam comes up, it is enough to take out the Dragonite, and it's good chip onto Torkoal. Dragonite goes down for Jost. And this Torkoal, meanwhile, is able to get a Flamethrower off into the Fluttermane, which in the sun is enough to pick up a knockout. It's knockouts left, right, and centre.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Talonflame surviving, they're probably better for Jost, because it's not really putting on too much pressure at this point. Unless the Lilligant is in the back, so used to saying the combination. The Lilligant is in the back. We're going to have to get confirmation of that. It is going to be. So that means actually the Talonflame surviving there was detrimental. If it would have been something like the Fluttermane, it wouldn't have been the worst thing, because you probably bulked out your Fluttermane at least. But the Lilligant itself, it's going to still be underspeeding this Talonflame, because normally it would outspeed everything, even Booster Energy Iron Bundle. But Tailwind is going to change that completely into Roberto's favor, and that means that the Talonflame will be able to outspeed. At least the Lilligant should still outspeed this Great Tusk. So you've got a Focus Sash on the Lilligant, you'll survive the Brave Bird. You'll be able to go for one more attack with the Lilligant before the Great Tusk attacks. Probably going to need to be a Sleep Powder to be able to put a stop to the Great Tusk, because it's going to be able to survive the Leaf Storm with the Focus Sash. But then actually, because you'll be taking the Brave Bird recoil as well, that won't be so bad. But it's not actually going to be Brave Bird here. Much smarter play in that taunt.
Taunt coming out from Talonflame, meaning Lilligant will not be able to go to one of its status moves, which it is so famed for. Earthquake coming out from Great Tusk, which doesn't affect Talonflame, but it is enough to pick up the knockout onto Torkoal, and the Lilligant taking a little bit of chip damage there as well. But a fantastic play going for the taunt from Talonflame onto the Lilligant.
Yeah, really, really smart play there. Because if you go for Brave Bird, you don't KO, you KO yourself to recoil, and then the Sleep Powder could potentially put a stop to that Great Tusk. That allows Torkoal to be able to go on the offensive and break the Focus Sash of the Great Tusk. So really, really smart choice of taunt there on the Talonflame. It's not on every Talonflame. It's dropped for some moves like Flare Blitz or even Protect as well, but taunt really, really useful there, locking up that game for sure.
Yeah, it's that Rock Slide miss on that first turn that could have changed the tides of the battle, and this is something we just have to deal with in Pokemon. And not only is there the chance to miss, it could miss on either Pokemon. It just so happened to be the crucial one that needed to be knocked out that got the miss.
Yeah, absolutely. So didn't seem like it would be too impactful on the second turn. Like, even though the Flutter Mane wouldn't have been faster, it still got the Dazzling Gleam off and it still got the KO that it needed onto the Choice Scarf Great Tusk. But it would have been the fact that Lilligant would have outsped everything in the back. The fact that there was the Talonflame outspeeding, able to taunt, put a stop to the Sleep Powder, that shut down the game completely. If the Talonflame was KO'd on that first turn, no Tailwind, Flutter Mane is underspeeding the Lilligant. Whatever's in the back is underspeeding the Lilligant. We did get the sneak peek. It was the Great Tusk as well and the Salamence. That means Lilligant is going to be the fastest Pokemon on the field. That allows it to go for those after use to get some eruptions. That allows it to take the chance to go for the Sleep Powders into the opposing Pokemon as well to try and free up the Torkoal. So that was a very significant miss on that first turn.
It was, and it's something that Jost is going to hope not to have a repeat of getting into Game 2. And, you know, another really crushing thing about that sort of game is that it's not like Jost played especially badly at all. He was making the right calls, and it just didn't work out in his favour. So, yeah, unfortunate for Jost, but hopefully he'll be able to keep a cool head going into Game 2, despite the drought from that Torkoal.
Yeah, he made the correct play for sure. Extreme Speed Rock Slide, really smart against opposing Talonflame, because there's not much that can stop a Gale Wings Tailwind. Extreme Speed has higher priority than Gale Wings, therefore that can break it first. And now because you've got the Choice Scarf and the Great Tusk, that outspeeds and would KO, but did not, unfortunately. And it does have to be Rock Slide. There's no other choice on that Great Tusk to be able to pick up the knockout on that opposing Talonflame. Maybe if you go for just, I'm going to ignore the Talonflame, accept the Tailwind, but on this turn, I'm outspeeding, Extreme Speed breaks the Gale Wings, and Headlong Rush KOs the Flutter Mane. That could be a potential alternative, because that is 100% accurate, as opposed to that Rock Slide that is a little bit shaky actually, and we can see what can happen if that does miss.
We absolutely can. It can cost you a game, and a cheeky glance to the camera there from Roberto. He's focused on Game 2 as we get into it, and we see the leads, and it's Dragonite and Great Tusk for Jost. Meanwhile, it's that Salamence and Great Tusk for Roberto.
Yeah, and that is a multi-scale on that Dragonite, so the Intimidate is going to come into play for both of the opposing Pokemon. A very smart adaptation for Roberto here, because you've seen what the game plan for Jost is if they're going to be leading with the Talonflame, so you can break that with the Extreme Speed. Now just getting the Intimidate on both Pokemon is going to be really, really nice for that Salamence, because you can still just switch it out, switch it back in any points and get some Intimidates going again, or you can just go on the offensive. The Air Slash is going to threaten massive damage into that Great Tusk. It will almost certainly be able to knock it out because Great Tusk has such poor special defense. That might be another reason why Salamence is run special on this team, because the dual Wing Beat would not be doing too much damage to the opposing Great Tusk. Air Slash is almost certainly picking up knockouts. So yeah, really, really nice adjustment to lead with this Salamence here, because it's threatening down both Pokemon while also helping with the damage reduction in the Intimidate.
And what a joy to see such a non-meta pick, as Great Tusk switches out for Roberto and he replaces it with his Flutter Mane in the back. Meanwhile, we see a Terror coming out from one of these trainers, and it will be a Terastallizing into the Dragonite for Jost. It becomes that flying type. Will be able to deal massive damage with any flying type moves it possesses. This Dragonite's type has changed to the single flying as Great Tusk goes for the Headlong Rush into the Salamence, predicting a switch there perhaps. Oh, Salamence going for the Air Slash, but Great Tusk avoids. That's karma based on what happened in Game 1 to Jost. Ice Spinner though coming out from Dragonite. It's not enough for the knockout. A very well-trained Salamence, despite the fact that that is a doubly super effective move into the Salamence.
Oh, that was certainly a turn. Yeah, we got the revenge there. Air Slash it's basically as accurate as you can be without being 100% accurate, and does occasionally get that little bit of a miss, a little bit of revenge for that rock slide there, because that would have almost certainly KO'd the Great Tusk, based on the fact its special defense is so poor. But it would have also KO'd the Salamence to its own life orb recoil based on that Ice Spinner damage. So it could be beneficial with the Salamence surviving there. It could be could have been more beneficial if the Salamence would have been KO'd and gotten a switch into the Pokemon into the back. We'll have to see if that is going to be the case, because now the Salamence is still around. It could just switch out again, save itself for the Intimidate, or it just gets KO'd here to the Extreme Speed instead.
Yeah, thanks Salamence, thanks for your service. You could have provided so much more without that air/miss, but hey, we don't blame you too much. That's the game we play as Headlong Rush comes out from Great Tusk into Fluttermane, dropping the defenses of the Great Tusk and bringing Fluttermane down to about a quarter its health. Dazzling Gleam coming out from the Fluttermane is enough for the easy one-hit knockout onto Great Tusk. And since Dragonite has now changed its type, it's no longer part Dragon, it will be able to take that Dazzling Gleam much better.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Great Tusk now KO'd. It should have probably been KO'd a turn previously by that Air Slash, but we'll take what we can get on this second turn. So there's still a nice position for both of these players. It depends on what's going to be coming in. We've seen the sneak peek of the Talonflame coming in for Roberto's side. We had the Lilligant and the Torkoal waiting in the back for Jost. If they bring in the Lilligants, you probably have to switch out the Dragonite straight away so you can get the Lilligant going in that chlorophyll environment it wants to be in. If you bring in the Torkoal, that's not actually so bad. You can still keep the Dragonite on the field and get some extra damage into the opposing Fluttermane or whatever comes in. You see the Talonflame, once again, is the Pokemon of choice to be able to bring in the back. So quite nice to preserve it so that Extreme Speed can't break it on that for turn 1, and you've taken care of the Great Tusk now. So it's not actually so bad that the Talonflame is joining the field while Extreme Speed could still break the Gale Wings. Because the awkward thing here is you want to break the Gale Wings so that Lilligant outspeeds. But in order to do that, you need the Sun active, therefore you need to switch out the Dragonite into the Torkoal, therefore you have not Extreme Speeded to break the Gale Wings on the Talonflame. So it's an awkward position for Jost at this point. The Talonflame gets to do what it wants this turn, whether that's set the Tailwind so that the Fluttermane outspeeds the Lilligant if the Torkoal switches in, or just go on the offensive. You've got a priority Break Bird that you can go for into the opposing Lilligant as well, and even if it's Extreme Speed to break that priority, you're still naturally faster than the Lilligant, so it doesn't actually matter that it was broken.
Yeah, all sorts of things to consider there as Lilligant goes for a Protect, keeping itself safe this turn. It's not a switch out into Torkoal, and it's Brave Bird from Talonflame into Dragonite, doing a good deal of chip damage, taking recoil in return, of course. Lilligant keeps itself safe from this Dazzling Gleam coming out from Fluttermane. Dragonite can't though, and oh, it's a critical hit. Would that have mattered? It might have done based on the damage from the previous turn, and Dragonite does go down for Jost, so he is down to his final 2 Pokemon. It's Lilligant. Will it be Torkoal in the back? We'll have to see.
You would assume so if you brought a Lilligant to the match. It's very rare to bring Lilligant without its buddy Torkoal there, and it is confirmation that that has been brought to this game. So relying on Lillicol to be able to carry the rest of this game. At least now you got into the position that I was saying previously, where you are now in the sun. So Lilligant is the fastest Pokemon on the field. Gale Wings is broken. Therefore, Lilligant is moving first this turn. Now, is that going to be a Sleep Powder to try and put a stop to the Talonflame going for the Tailwind? Is it going to be an After You to go for an Eruption with the Torkoal? Because that probably is not enough to KO the Talonflame. It definitely is going to be able to KO the Fluttermane, but then that slot can't really do anything about it. If it switches into the Great Tusk that's in the back, that's brought down to its Focus Sash, and then you still outspeed the Great Tusk even in the Tailwind with your Lilligant. So that's actually still a pretty reasonable position, even though you've lost your Dragonite at this point and down to just the Lillicol. The fact that you can just go for an After Your Eruption, and that slot, whether it's the Fluttermane or the switching in Great Tusk, is not going to appreciate it, would be very nice as well. But Sleep Powder works here perfectly fine as well to stop the Tailwind.
Sleep Powder does connect here, which is, it claws back some ground from that Rock Slide miss in the first game. And Talonflame is now asleep. Whatever move it was going for, it was not able to do then. And Dazzling Gleam does massive damage to the Lilligant there. As Torkoal is able to go for an Eruption, it's an easy knockout onto the Talonflame. Onto the Fluttermane, I mean. With the critical hit, that didn't matter so much, I don't think, as Talonflame just takes a little bit of chip damage, and we see that the Great Tusk is coming back in for Roberto.
Yeah, now it might need to be a game of sleep here, because if you go for the Leaf Storm, you're just going to bring it down to the Focus Sash, and now that it's in the sun as well and getting its Photosynthesis activated to increase its attack even further, Earthquake is KOing both Pokemon. You cannot let this Great Tusk go for Earthquake. If it does, it wins. So you kind of have to go for a Sleep Powder this turn. It can't be Leaf Storm, and it can't be After You either, because neither of those stop the Great Tusk by KOing it before it would go on the offensive. Therefore, you kind of have to rely on the Sleep turns here. And that means you're ignoring the Talonflame as well. It's going to be guaranteed to sleep here. That might be a way for Protectors coming out from the Great Tusk to stall an extra turn of sleep so that the Talonflame could wake up in the future, because the Lilligant is forced to Sleep Powder.
It's forced to Sleep Powder, and the Great Tusk is, of course, protected from it. Talonflame takes its mandatory turn of sleep. We'll have to see what Torkoal responds with, trying to chip away at this thing. And it is the flamethrower, into the Talonflame, and that is a lot of damage, considering it was a not very effective hit. In the sun, it brings Talonflame down to just 7 HP, and there is every chance that this Talonflame will remain asleep for another turn.
Yeah, it's just game asleep now. Does Sleep Powder connect on the Great Tusk, and does Talonflame wake up, allowing Great Tusk to potentially wake up in the future? There's the start, there's the Sleep Powder connect. Does this Talonflame wake up?
Does the Talonflame wake up indeed as its buddy falls asleep? Talonflame remains asleep. So there you go, the power of sleep. And fortunately, this Lilligant seems to be more accurate than the Rock Slide coming out in that previous game from the Great Tusk. And an Eruption here is enough to pick up that Talonflame. And that's really good damage onto the Great Tusk, and just showing how lacking its special defense is compared to its physical defense.
Yeah, the Torkoal is only just above half HP, so that's a significantly weakened Eruption. Now you just need to connect with the Leaf Storm, and you've got the game. There is still the opportunity that the Leaf Storm can miss, and then you get the first turn Wake Up, and Earthquake can still win the game. So we'll have to see if that's going to be coming into play. But actually, no, you've got a guaranteed win condition in that after. You don't need to risk that shaky accuracy in the Leaf Storm. After you Flamethrower is going to be enough to take this to a game 3.
It absolutely is, and rubbing salt in the wound there, the famous After You move coming out from Lilligant to wrap up this game for Jost. We will be heading into Game 3, and to be honest, I feel like that's only fair. These players are so well matched, and not only that, but of course, making up for a potentially crucial Rock Slide miss in Game 1. So I'm excited for both of these trainers that they get to play a third match.
Yeah, we've had a miss for miss going into the Game 1. Rock Slide miss in the Game 1, and then the Air Slash miss in Game 2. So we'll have to see if that's going to be similar strategies going for in that Game 3, whether they still go for the Rock Slides to try and take out the Talonflame. The Air Slash from the Salamence would have been very impactful as well. I think the Salamence was a very good adaptation going into that lead, especially with the Intimidate. But just missing the KO on the Great Tusk, not what you wanted to be seeing there. Maybe you just go for the Salamence and switch it out and switch it back in, because it's going to be very good against the Lilligant and the Torkoal waiting in the back. So the fact that it was just taken down so low and in range of Life Orb, or in Extreme Speed in the case of Game 2, by the Ice Spinner, was very detrimental, because that would have been a very good Pokemon to take on the Lilligant and Torkoal in the back.
Yeah, very detrimental indeed, and it just goes to show how important status conditions can be, especially sleep. It's something that can really clinch out a game, no matter how well it's going for you. Of course, though, you often have to rely on inaccurate moves like Sleep Powder, which is why some trainers prefer to use the 100% accurate Spore from Amoonguss, but of course Amoonguss is so much slower. So these are the trade-offs we have to make while playing this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you don't have to rely on the Sleep Powder from the Lilligant. Definitely can be the after use, like we did see. Didn't have to click the Leaf Storm at all. Leaf Storm would have been brilliant against the Great Tusk, but it is the shaky accuracy. The after you guaranteeing this move is moving next is a really, really good form of speed control in itself. We've got the Talonflame that can set the tailwind. That's already going to be brilliant speed control. It's going to be one of the most used that we've seen across all of the formats. But after you is very respectable in itself, and it doesn't have to just be the Torkoal. It can be the other Pokemon in the back. The Lilligant is going to be so fast in the sun, you're going to be sorted regardless, and just go for after you into either Pokemon. In this case, it didn't end up being the Torkoal, because that was the Pokemon that was still waiting in the back. And then you got the guaranteed win condition of, I will 100% accurate Flamethrower, as opposed to, I might miss my Leaf Storm, and then they might wake up on the first turn and get the Earthquake. So just being able to guarantee that game at the end, very, very nice. Even if you had to rely on the shaky accuracy of the Sleep Powder, that you then set yourself up into a 100% win condition.
Yeah, and that Torkoal, we have to give a shout out to that Torkoal, because Flamethrower doing so much damage, even that quite low health Eruption as well. But coming into Game 3, we see a big switch up from Jost's side in that King Gambit and Fluttermane. Meanwhile, it's Roberto who's leading Fluttermane and Talonflame.
Yeah, so switching back to that Game 1, if you face down the Great Tusk and the Dragonite again, that was opening up the Extreme Speed and the Rock Slide once again. But a very interesting choice of the King Gambit. We didn't see it in that previous Game 1 or Game 2, but joining the field in this one. So curious to see what Jost is thinking with that King Gambit, because it is going to be pairing up very well against the Fluttermane. It's not going to pair too well against the opposing Talonflame, especially if there is a Will-O-Wisp coming out. So you do have the option of going for Terra Fire if you do want to be avoiding the Will-O-Wisp that could be coming out on the opposing King Gambit. That would guarantee that it's going to be able to do the massive damage this turn. But then if you've got something like the Dragonite in the back, you won't be able to go for the Terra with that. So if we do see a Terra from the King Gambit, it's unlikely we'll be seeing the Dragonite in the back.
That's a really good point, and we do see a Terra coming out on turn 1, and the Pokemon it will be going into is the Fluttermane for Is that Roberto or is that Jost? It looks like it's Roberto.
Yeah, it would be Roberto's one because it's got grass on Jost's one.
Fairy Terror on this Fluttermane as we respond with a Terror. Will it be into that Kingambit to make it the fire type? It absolutely will. So this Kingambit will be immune to any Will-O-Wisp that could be coming out from Talonflame, keeping its attack stat nice and healthy, able to deal a massive amount of damage, and Talonflame does indeed try to go for that Will-O-Wisp. So an excellent call there from Jost. Fluttermane is able to respond with a Shadow Ball. The Fluttermane on Roberto's side is going to be able to take it much better now. It's no longer part Ghost type. Roberto's Fluttermane responds with a Moonblast into Jost Fluttermane, brings it down right to very low HP, but it's not a sash on the Fluttermane, so really well trained. Terra Blast Fire coming out from Kingambit will of course be enough to pick up the knockout onto Roberto's Fluttermane. A really well played turn from both trainers, I think.
Yeah, getting massive damage onto the opposing Fluttermane. That's going to put it in range of any attack that would want to be going for on Roberto's side of the field, but also a very smart choice of going for the Terra, calling that it would not be a Tailwind coming out from the Talonflame. It was going to be that Will-O-Wisp instead, so really, really nice there. The awkward thing is that with the fire typing, as nice as it is to be immune to Will-O-Wisps, it keeps you weak to ground as your Terra type. So now that the Great Tusk has joined the field and the Fluttermane is so low, there's not really anything stopping a Gale Wings Tailwind because the Gale Wings was not broken on that Talonflame. Both attacks went into that opposing Fluttermane, so now that's still active. You get to go for Tailwind and you get to go for Earthquake, and that's still huge damage into either Pokemon. At least you can't go for a Ground Terror, which would almost certainly guarantee that the Kingambit goes down that turn. It's probably going to be able to survive just a regular Earthquake. You could opt to go for the Headlong Rush if you wanted to guarantee that KO happens, but that would still allow the Fluttermane to be able to move that turn. Unless you just go for a Brave Bird, instead you don't have to go for Tailwind this turn. You could go for the priority Brave Bird to KO the Fluttermane, and then follow up the KO into the opposing Kingambit, but not if it's going to be switching out into Lilligant instead.
Lilligant comes in for the Kingambit, and Talonflame is able to get off that Tailwind, so Roberto's Pokemon will be moving faster. Earthquake coming out from Great Tusk. It doesn't affect Talonflame, not very effective into Lilligant, but more than enough to deal with the Fluttermane on Jost's side. So both Fluttermanes down, and it's down to the remaining 3 Pokemon for both of these trainers.
Yeah, Lilligant's a good switch into the Earthquake, but you have to do it at the cost of your Focus Sash. And now that that's been broken, Talonflame can KO this Lilligant. It's not going to be able to survive a Brave Bird regularly, so the fact that you can just get this KO now with a Brave Bird, really, really nice for Roberto, because now you don't need to go for Earthquake into the opposing Pokemon as well. You need to go for Earthquake to KO the Fluttermane the previous turn. That meant that you wouldn't have been able to KO the Kingambit. Now you don't need to do that. You can commit to Headlong Rush instead and potentially pick up the knockout on the Kingambit because you can just go for the Brave Bird to KO the other Pokemon in this Lilligant. There's not really anything that can stop that. You can protect the Lilligant and then break the Gale Wings on the Talonflame if you're able to survive the Headlong Rush, but then that's still going to be incredibly awkward because you'd have taken so much damage on your Kingambit.
Exactly. Lilligant is able to keep itself safe this turn, however, going for a Protect, and Brave Bird was indeed targeting into that slot. So Lilligant's sitting pretty for at least another turn, as Great Tusk does go for a Headlong Rush into Kingambit, and it's another clutch survival for the Kingambit. Very well-trained Pokemon. This is the difference coming into this late stage of the day. As a Fire-type Terra Blast comes out from Kingambit on Jost's side into Great Tusk, dealing about half of the health to the Great Tusk. But wow, what a clutch survival.
Yeah, absolutely. But Gale Wings wasn't broken. You needed to target down the Talonflame there so that you can stop the Gale Wings, because that would have allowed you a switch into the Torkoal and the potential Sleep Powder to try and claw back into this game. But really, now there's not much stopping this Great Tusk and this Talonflame. You get to click Brave Bird and Earthquake, and that should sort you for the rest of the game, with assumedly the Torkoal waiting in the back. If there is that Dragonite that we're assuming is not because the Terror was committed to the Kingambit instead, then that could be a way back into this game, because that would be able to take on the onslaught of Earthquake and the Brave Bird instead. But it looks like there's not too many options for Jost with just a failed double protect.
Failed double protect, and Brave Bird is easily enough to pick up the knockout into this poor Lilligant. It was worth a try for Jost, but of course Protect becomes less likely to succeed the more often you use it. Talonflame takes that recoil damage. Sucker Punch coming out from Kingambit, not very effective, of course, into the fighting type that is Great Tusk. Another Earthquake from Great Tusk will be enough to pick up this very low health Kingambit, and it suddenly seems like Roberto is very much in the driver's seat.
Yeah, if there's going to be that Torkoal waiting in the back, there's not really too much to be done at this point. You'll probably survive a Headlong Rush. Given that the Kingambit survived a Headlong Rush, Torkoal's a little bit more bulky on the physical side, so should be able to survive this, but then you've got to contend with the fact that you can have to take a Brave Bird as well. and then take another Brave Bird because you can't KO the Talonflame because you can only go for a Flamethrower, because your Eruption would be very pitiful if you go for it after a Headlong Rush as well. So pretty much sealed for Roberto at this point. It seems like King Gambit was probably not the adaptation that was needed for Jost there. It seemed like it was pretty good just based on that turn 1, but then on turn 2 onwards, the King Gambit really wasn't doing enough. The Terra Fire was really nice to avoid Will-O-Wisp, but then you're still just weak to Earthquake and the Headlong Rushes. And even if you're able to survive, Great Tusk was just positioned so well after those first couple of turns that there really wasn't any way back into the game.
No, absolutely, and at least it was a more decisive win in that Game 3 for Roberto, as opposed to a potential win or loss coming down to misses of attacks. It just seemed like King Gambit was not the adjustment to make for Jost. So, you know, always a good idea to try and switch up your board state, but perhaps actually in this situation, Jost would have been better off going with the leads or the Pokemon choices that worked for him in the previous game.
Yeah, because Roberto did go back to that game 1 lead of the Talonflame and the Fluttermane. So if they went with the Dragonite and Great Tusk again, there's nothing stopping the Extreme Speed and Rock Slide. Sure, you can switch into Great Tusk and that'll take it pretty well, but then you still got to contend with the shaky accuracy once again of the Rock Slide. We saw the shaky accuracy of the Air Slash come into play. So it was a bit awkward for both those players. Maybe Jost would have been able to take that first game if the Rock Slide connected. Maybe Roberto would have been able to take that second game if the Air Slash had connected as well. So yeah, it was a little bit awkward in the first turns of the first few games. It was a very cool turn 1 of the Game 3, for sure. Being able to make yourself immune to the Will-O-Wisp, no, I'm not going for Tailwind here, I'm going for the Will-O-Wisp instead. But then after that cool turn 1, that actually put you so far on the back foot without even realizing it.
Yeah, exactly. The fire on the King Gambit was an excellent choice to avoid the Will-O-Wisp, but that's sort of all it got out of that Fire Terror, unfortunately, in that game. And we have to give a shout out, I think, to the taunt on the Talonflame there,
yes,
which was such an effective way in shutting down that Lilligant, which by itself isn't the biggest offensive threat, but paired with a Torkoal or most other Pokemon can be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not always run on Talonflame. It was previously. Like a lot of Talonflames back very early would always run the combination of Tailwind and Taunt, because Tailwind makes you go fast, Taunt stops them from going slow in regards to going for Trick Rooms and all of the other supported stuff that Taunt likes to stop. But yeah, Taunt locking down that Lilligant really, really nice, because if you didn't have Taunt, you have to go for Brave Birds. That KOs yourself to the recoil. It doesn't KO the Lilligant because it's still got the Focus Sash, therefore we have to play with the Sleep Powder accuracy. If that connects, that's looking really bad. So yeah, Taunt's locking down that endgame completely. Really, really nice there for Roberto.
Yeah, and you can see what happens if the taunt isn't able to get off with the end of that game too, with just both of Roberto's remaining Pokemon taking a snooze on the field and rendering them useless going into the end game that was so crucial for Jost. But it's really interesting to see that Lilycole, Core, and indeed a team that's incredibly similar to the winning team from Vancouver, piloted by Abdullah, coming to the fore again and doing so well.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's really good to see an interesting pick in that Salamence as well. Didn't actually do anything because it just missed the Air Slash and got KO to Extreme Speed afterwards. But it could have done really cool things because it actually does pair very well against Elegant and Torkoal. So yeah, well, has made it into the day 2 as well, because that is now the 7th win for Roberto. They have made it into that day 2 with a very cool pick in the Salamence. So very happy to see that. A
very cool pick, and indeed our mascot here today, our dear little Salamence here, cheering on Salamence from the casting desk.
Yeah, so when are we getting the Weavars then? Who's going to be getting the Weavile into the day 2?
Yeah, who's going to be bringing the Eviolite Bagon? That's what I want to know. We'll very shortly be able to get into an interview with our winner from that previous match. And what a way to wrap up that round 8 for Roberto. He's now 1 and on, so to speak. He's winning and he's heading into day 2.
Win 1 and on. That's the way for it. Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, and can still, like, you still want to win in your next game as well. Don't want to relax. If you take another win, that's extra insurance going into this day 2 as well. 8-1 is so much better than 7-2 going into the day 2 of Swiss. So yeah, can't relax just yet. One more round to go. So yeah, does need to keep their head in the game just a little bit longer.
Yeah, Professor Boyd, listen to his wise words. It really does pay dividends going into day 2. It just depends on how much more energy these trainers are able to eke out going into the final stages of day 1.
Yeah, and you had to put reasonable amount of mental energy into being able to pilot against a team that has won a regional championships before. Like, obviously you need a game plan going into it, but the fact that the game plan would have been don't dodge a rock slide initially in that game 1, probably not the best of game plans to come into it with, but then again that would have been very good against Lilligant and Torko's elite, because then Talonflame matches up very well to be able to get the Gearwings tailwind, and then the Fluttermane outspeeds and do whatever it wants that turn. So it was really, really nice from Jost on that first turn, but not quite coming into the play there. But yeah, still really strong throwing from Roberto to adapt even after that as well. Like to be able to try and adapt with the after the air slash miss as well. Still be able to take care of the Great Tusk. It just came down to the sleep turns in the end.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And well, it seems like we've seen plenty of Fluttermane today, maintaining that high usage stat that we saw from, for example, Vancouver. Fluttermane's everywhere, really dominating the meta in Regulation B.
Yeah, we saw, what, 49.8% previously was the statistic for Vancouver. I would be very interested to see how many we would be getting in this tournament as well, because based on what we've seen on stream, it's like close to 100%, isn't it? Or at least like 80%. I think there's only a few teams that haven't featured a Fluttermane so far, because it has been so strong. And also to shout out, most of the Fluttermanes we've been seeing are choice specs. So that definitely seems to be picking up. I think Focus Sash was probably the most common item, because, oh, look at that defense, it's terrible. I need to survive a hit. But it seems like trainers are saying, okay, I will use the choice specs to patch up the fact that I'm not investing in special attack, and here is all this bulk that survives all these attacks that have been coming out. We've been seeing on the stream plenty of survivals that Fluttermane really has no right to be able to survive. Like the biggest one that we saw previously was the Terra Ground, granted -1, Terra Ground Headlong Rush after Chip from Icy Wind was able to survive. So there's the adaptation seems to be going for this bulky choice specs Fluttermane, and that's a complete deviation from the just bulkless Focus Sash version.
It absolutely is. And again, it's one way in which you can catch your opponent off guard if you have a Fluttermane. We all know what that does, but then you change the EVs a little bit, and suddenly you're dealing with a Fluttermane that's sticking around for longer than you were bargaining for, and it's something you then have to take into consideration for future turns that you're expecting not to have to think about at all.
Yeah, and the fact that you're investing into the defenses. Also, do you play the speed creep war with Fluttermane? Obviously, going first is very nice, and you'd have to invest completely in your speed to be able to ensure that. But then downside to that is that's a lot of lost potential bulk. That is definitely not a special attack boost if you're in the getting the Protosynthesis activated, which a lot of teams are with the Torkoals, which you generally prefer special attack, because stacking special attack boost on choice specs and then maybe even a helping hand from a Torkoal does absolute massive damage. But then where do you stop with the speed? Do you go for, okay, I'll outspeed a Dondozer that's got Commander. I'll outspeed a little bit more because some people will stop that. I'll outspeed a Mousehold, and then it just keeps going, and then it keeps climbing and climbing. And where do you stop? Because the more speed you have and the more likely you are to outspeed opposing Fluttermane is less bulk you have for survival. So it's a very big trade-off, because the bulk investment is so significant given that the defense stat is so low. We'll have to see how trainers are going to go forward with this choice specs, because it seems to be the most common, and it's just speed creep war, defense. What are you prioritizing? Yeah,
it's just a little bit here, a little bit there. That's the way we have to do these EVs. And why don't we get into our interview now with our winner from that previous game to learn a little bit more about his team. Here is Roberto Parente.
Welcome back, everybody. We just had our round 8, and of course I have the winner from that round. We have Roberto here. How are you feeling after that round?
Thank you very much. I'm feeling pretty good, because I finally managed to cut another tournament after the disaster in Bochum, and I'm really happy. I made it on stream, and so I'm happy, and now I hope to win the last round in order to have a better resistance and better score for tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. That must feel pretty good, having that last win on stream, and then as well you're winning in to say for the next day. So going into the matchup, what were your first thoughts seeing your opponent's team?
Yeah, the matchup is were something I basically prepared a lot, but it's always something pretty tricky. Because Lilligant, Torkoal, slip out, and I was a bit lucky in game 1 with that rock slide miss on my Talonflame that basically allows me to win the game. And the second game, I missed the Ice Slash that probably would have a mean game for me. But I'm happy that I won the last game.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, luck is always involved in these battles, and
yes,
the air slash as well, and rock slide miss, and of course, hitting sleep powders is one of those things as well that you have to be able to do. And so we saw like making a few changes from game one. So first game one, you had the lead with the Talonflame, with the Flutter main, just going offensive, try to deal as much damage. That rock slide missed, although it was lucky. What was your, after game one, after you finished that, what was your plan like? Because you did not want to get hit by that rock slide. You had to change your plan there.
I wanted to do the same plan because that's my game plan for that matchup. Yeah. But I didn't want to play the mind game and terrestrialize my Talonflame turn 1. So I just decided to try something different, expecting the same lead. And then tried to bring the Salamence. And would have been good if he didn't miss the air slash. But we take that and
exactly.
And in the last game, I just decided to came back to my plan because that's the game plan for that team.
Yeah.
And basically, I just had to spam damage.
Yeah.
And I lost the first turn mind games because I expected the Terra on Flutter main and Will-O-Wisp the King Gambit.
Exactly, yeah.
But from there, Great Task just had the clean way.
Exactly.
I think my opponent just made a little mistake bringing Lilligant in and then taking the EQ because I just broke
you broke the focus sash, and the Talonflame was still at full health.
Yes, Talonflame was a very
bird,
yes, for him was very scary.
Exactly.
And so I just happy I managed to win after 3 games. Yeah, maybe not the beautiful games, but we take it.
All Pokemon games can be beautiful if you analyze them enough, of course.
Yes.
Well, a thing as well that happened as well was that when you, with your Great Tusk, went for that headlong rush, were you very surprised about a King Gambit surviving there?
Honestly, I expected it.
You expected it?
Yeah. Yes, because even Mike Gambit can take some hits.
Yeah.
So I expected it, but I had no better moves because I didn't want to risk the Lilligant not to protect. And then, I mean, I was just safe to attack because King Gambit really doesn't scare no one of my Pokemon in that. In that
Great Tusk, not that scared.
Great Tusk, Talonflame.
Exactly.
We're safe in front of King Gambit.
If we're mentioning your team as well, we have to talk about the Salamence as well. Not a Roaring Moon there, but Salamence. And do tell, how did you come up with the Salamence itself?
Yes, basically, less than 1 week ago, I was without a team.
Yeah.
And I just tried to improve the Talon Task team that I've been using for basically all the season.
Yeah.
And a few days ago, the day before I left Italy to go to come here, I just talked with a friend that suggested me the Salamence. Yes, Francesco Rasini, Olimac suggested me the Salamence, and I really like the choice because it's helpful with Intimidate.
Yeah.
It has good damage output.
Yeah.
I didn't care too much about running the Hurricane on it.
Yes. Yeah.
But as you saw,
it can still miss, unfortunately.
But is okay. This way, Salamence, I think, is a very, very good pick for the actual meta.
Yeah.
Because obviously he's weak to Flutter Main and Iron Bundle. The Terra type can make it a bit easier.
Yeah.
But I just like it to spam damage when you need to spam damage.
Yeah. It does do a lot of damage and it is that little surprise factor as well.
Yeah.
Because not a lot of people are prepping for it anymore because they're so used to seeing Roaring Moon, of course, as well.
Yes, it's also very useful against the Dondoso because you basically didn't drop when you attack the Dondoso.
Yeah.
And with Intimidate, maybe Dondoso doesn't touch it at all.
You mentioned earlier as well, you went to Bochum as well.
Yes.
Didn't go so well, but like the previous, did you have any experience about the previous tournaments? How did the previous tournaments go for you, except for Bochum?
Yes, I made this year's World Top 16.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for that results, of course, and happy for these results result after I made very bad in Bochum. Yeah, I really enjoyed my experience playing Pokemon since the very start of my playing. And so I'm pretty glad I got there and pretty happy to cut another tournament afterwards.
All right. So you might say this might be, just for a second, be your proudest moment right now.
Yes.
Of course, next to maybe winning it all tomorrow as well. That is the possibility, of course. That is the goal, of course. Try and win it all. And thinking of winning it all afterwards, after this event, we have EUIC, and EUIC has Regulation C. Have you considered any of the new Pokemon there?
I didn't try something yet because I just wanted to prepare for this tournament. I didn't want to make another bad performance after Bochum, so I just wanted to prepare for this. And tomorrow after the tournament we can start to look something for the new regulations. Yes.
We can start thinking about what next because
I have a few ideas just because I like playing hyper offensive team. So Dragonite Chimpao just seems my favorites. But let's see.
Yeah, that is something to look forward to as well. Are you going to EUIC itself as well?
Unfortunately, I didn't manage to register. So I have to hope for something to change.
Well, there are still future events. Luckily, we still have Malmo. And
we have Malmo in Torino, in Italy.
Torino, of course.
So I hope to attend there.
Yeah.
And just keep pushing the season.
Do your best there as well. So that is everything. Is there anyone else you would like to shout out? Anything else you'd like to mention as well?
Of course, as I said before, a big shout out is for Francesco Rasini that really gave me the pick of Salamence. And it worked very well. And of course to all the other Italian people that are here are supporting me, and I'm so happy for this result, and I'm so thankful to everywhere that are helping me. To everyone is helping me.
Well deserved. You played very well, and hopefully see you tomorrow as well. And that will be all for this interview. We will be shortly back with round 9. So stay tuned.